Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
And welcome to another episode of Tales from the Fandom. I am joined today by Chase of the Another Path podcast. I'm glad to have you here, Chase, to talk about your fandoms, as well as eventually getting to talk about your podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I always enjoy getting to talk to people, not only people who do podcasts, but obviously like actual play podcasts are a big thing that I love to listen to and promote and get out there. So it's wonderful to have you on.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here. Always, love talking about D&D and all the other sundry things that I enjoy. So cool to be here.
And you hit on like some of the top things that I love. And I want to start off first with something that's, I guess, the oldest of the bunch, and that's the Harry Potter series.
Oh, yes.
Were you a book reader first or a movie watcher first?
Yeah, I was a book reader first. I got them in the Scholastic Book Fair back in probably 6th grade, I think is when I ended up getting those. And we got the first one, and I sat down and read it in the span of a week. Did the same for the second, did the same for the third, and then there wasn't a fourth, and I was incredibly sad. So I was on that wait and grind for a long time.
Okay, you and I, okay, so this is going to be very dating. So you got in, well, it was 6th grade with the 3 books out, and I got into it in my junior year of college when there was only the 3 books out.
Ah, okay. Perfectly setting up that time frame gap. Excellent.
Yes, wonderful. Now, do you have a favorite of the books?
You know, honestly, it changes depending on the day that you ask me. I'm going to say today my favorite is the 6th book. Because it is the closest to a normal year that Harry gets. And I actually really like that kind of slice of life. This is just what it's like to be at a magic school. There's some stuff going on, but it's mostly classes and like high school drama. And after kind of the intensity of the previous books, it's a really nice change to kind of dial that back and see what it's just like to live in this world.
I hadn't even thought of that before. Normally people talk about Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, but I've never heard that statement about Half-Blood Prince before.
Yeah, it is. I think I'm going to speak for my wife now because I am a huge fan for this series. She is a mega fan for this series. And I believe that's, she is the one that turned me on to that mode of thinking. And I like, it used to be one of my lesser ones, but like with the reading of that in mind, it's like, this is just how people exist in this weird magical world. It's like, that's really neat.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'm going to have to go back and reread it when my kids get done with it, because that's like a nice take about it. I've never heard that. And that is very true as far as it being a very normal year of stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
With every person that comes on and talks about Harry Potter, I have to ask, what house are you?
I am a Slytherin.
I think I now have a whole hand of Slytherin people. I have maybe five people that I've recorded with that are Slytherins.
Excellent. Yeah, that was it came as a bit of a surprise to me because I'm sure I, like most other people who were into it, as soon as you got the beta email for Pottermore back when that came out, you moved heaven and earth to get to a computer so that you can do that sorting. And for me, that meant at that point I was working at a theme park in the fall as a scary Halloween monster, and I was staying on site over the weekend. And this was before like smartphones were like super ubiquitous, so I had to haul my little netbook down to the on-site subway so I could use their very, very bad internet with my very, very bad computer to take the test.
That's dedication right there.
It was the internet there was a bit of a harrowing experience. However, it was one of those things where it's like it's like, what, really? Actually, no, that tracks, that works. That's right. I was expecting a Hufflepuff or a Ravenclaw. That was definitely not Gryffindor, which I think actually probably should have been my tip-off.
Now, what do you identify with as far as Slytherin?
I'm a plotter. I like to plan. I like to scheme. It's one of the things that I feel like makes me a pretty good DM, is I like to lay my little traps for people to walk in on. And I like to see the execution of the plans, and, watching everything go off without a hitch is it's very satisfying for me. Also pretty ambitious. I feel like if you're, anybody starting a podcast these days, you've got to have at least a little bit of a kernel of that. And I'll get into this more towards the end of the show, but, I'm working on trying to expand what we are doing with podcasts and over at Another Path Industries. So that ambition is something that, it is a driving force in my life. And I know for, the pursuit of knowledge is for driving force for Ravenclaws, and, the pursuit of like a deeper friendship for Hufflepuffs, and the pursuit of making incredible mistakes for Gryffindors. I'm kidding. From the Gryffindors. But the pursuit of kind of making a name for yourself by doing something bigger and better for Gryffindors. So we all have those things that kind of push us, and the ambition to see plans kind of come together like that. That's one of the things that drives me.
That's awesome. I know when my kids all took the test within probably the past month, and my oldest son, he took it and he got Slytherin, and he was really upset at the time. And I had to tell him, not all Slytherins are bad. They have different qualities, and that's what you got to focus on.
That's right. I mean, it is essentially Apocrypha at this point, but the spoilers for The Cursed Child if you haven't read that yet, but it centers around 2 Slytherins.
Mm-hmm. It does. Yes, and Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is definitely one of those divisive Harry Potter things in the fandom, too.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. That was I was having the weekend that that it actually came out on the West End. I was actually having a very, very rough weekend, and reading the synopses that people were posting online, it's like, this can't be real. Are we really doing this? Apparently, and then I bought the book. It's like, all right, I guess we're doing this. I was like, all right, if this is what's canon. My wife's like, that's not canon. This is not. She hasn't even finished the actual play yet. It's like, she can't get through it because she spends a lot of time plumbing the depths of fan fiction, both reading and writing. And it is it reads like kind of poor fan fiction, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I've heard from people that have gone to see the actual play that it works a lot better as a stage show than in the way that is presented reading it.
I really hope so, and I'm sure it does, because I was thinking that as I was reading it myself, but that is and there are some moments in that show that are very, very good. There is one discussion between Harry, Hermione, and Draco that I actually genuinely really love, but it takes a while to get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as far as the world of Harry Potter, everyone has a favorite character. So who is your favorite?
And that is a tough one, just because I do take a lot of it just as a whole. I think at the end of the day, though, my favorite character, and this is something, again, I have to thank my wife for pointing this out to me, is Neville. Because nobody grows throughout those books like Neville does. Like, there is character growth for all of them, especially Ron is a very, very close second in that. But Neville turns from this very, very meek, demure character into the literal leader of a rebellion at Hogwarts by the end of Book 7. And you don't really see that progression happening until 5th book is when it really starts to come through with the Dumbledore's army forming and taking the classes, and he finds his confidence through that, but he overcomes so much in that process, and then at the end of book 7 you bust into Hogwarts and you find that he has actually taken the reins where Harry might have had he gone back.
Yeah, Neville is and has always been my favorite character because of the growth, and because he's that character that no one ever expected. It's like, oh, it's Neville. Oh, it's Neville.
Oh, Neville.
And then you find out so much, about him as a character, and it could have been Neville Longbottom and the insert, book title here type of books instead of Harry. And I really like that, obviously, Voldemort chooses who his victim essentially is going to be, but Neville is just intertwined in it. And if they ever decide to do a book, I would love to see a book set in Hogwarts during that 7th year with Neville and Ginny kind of.
Oh yes, please.
Yeah, like, being those leaders within the school and showing you what they go through and what everyone else goes through during that year.
Yeah, I am 100% with you on that. I would love to see that book. If they had done it just a little bit closer, they probably could have squeaked out an 8th movie out of the series and not heard a complaint out of me at all. Just film that one right. Actually, why didn't they do that? Just film that right alongside. It's not like you were using those actors for anything like during when they were filming 7-1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how I would feel about other books following this one, unless, except for that one. I did enjoy that first Fantastic Beasts movie. I am incredibly looking forward to the next one. I'm looking forward to seeing Jude Law as Dumbledore.
Mm-hmm.
I think that will be a young Dumbledore is something that I feel like obviously myself, but I think a lot of people have been kind of eager to see.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely like I went into Fantastic Beasts kind of like, whatever. They're just what, I didn't really care for it. But then by the end of the movie, I was like, well, number one, my house is represented by Newt Scamander, Hufflepuff all the way. And then
exactly.
Then the relationships with, like, especially Jacob and Queenie, like those two made my movie. I love that.
Yeah. And you've mentioned this a couple times. How old are your kiddos?
9 and then twin 8-year-olds.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, no, so right in the pocket for Harry Potter right now.
Oh yeah, like my daughter, the one of the twins, is the one that's actually reading the book super quick. So she's halfway through Prisoner of Azkaban as we record this in January, or February. We're in February now.
Yep, February. Yeah, that is Azkaban is my second favorite book because it is it really hit me right when I was probably about 12, 13 years old, and reading about specifically the segment when he is living at the Leaky Cauldron and walking into town every day. That was a really liberating fantasy, like low grade fantasy for me. And I was like, oh yeah, I could just go and do things, because we lived way out in the boonies for most of my time growing up. My dad was a camp director for a lot of my childhood, which meant we lived on summer camps year round in the middle of nowhere.
Oh wow, that must have been a very interesting experience growing up.
It was kind of funny because I did have the like my front yard was horses for a large chunk of my childhood. And then eventually we did spend like a 2-year stint in a suburb, and my folks were like, we're going to go buy a farm somewhere. And so we went off and, to another part of Ohio, and we lived out in the boonies again until I graduated from high school.
As far as the movies go, is your favorite movie separate from your favorite book, or do you like it is it the same movie that you like?
No, those that order gets totally shuffled. 6 is still pretty high up there though, but I think the 7s come in as my 2 favorites just because they do have I feel like they did the books the best justice in those 2, with a couple of minor exceptions here and there. I feel like they biffed that final confrontation, but that's just me. And books, 3 and 4 come in and they tie for my least favorite, just because I think they're very, very poor adaptations. Even if 3 is a pretty decent movie if you just take it on its own.
Yeah, I know one of my kids had asked while we were watching, because ABC Freeform had always done those marathons.
Oh,
and they're
yeah.
like, why aren't they wearing their robes? And I had to explain they can wear real clothes sometimes.
Yeah, my problem is that they just never address the Marauders at all. And that is a pretty pivotal... That's not just a plot point for that book, that's a plot point for the series. And they just kind of skive on over top of it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I know that a lot of people were disappointed about, was the lack of some of the backstory that you kind of really need to know. And that, the Marauders is definitely one of those big things. Now, moving from Harry Potter to something that's maybe Harry Potter but with more violence and sex,
yes,
is HBO's Game of Thrones series.
Yes.
Now, again, books first or TV show first?
TV show first. I will freely admit that I have not made it all the way through those books as I have gotten older. Just finding the time to sit down and read these cyclopean tomes has gotten a bit harder.
Yeah, it's definitely up there with the with people that talk about, oh, I love Lord of the Rings, I just can't get through them kind of way.
Yep.
Yeah, I did read. I read the books after the first season came out, but after that, like, I know it's going to be hard whenever he releases the next book, if he ever releases it, to go back and separate TV show from books.
Yeah. I got all the way through the first book pretty well because that book actually translates like almost 1-to-1 from the show. They did a fantastic job with the adaptation of that. But the second book is where it starts to deviate. And of course, as the seasons go on, they deviate more and more and more. And I got like maybe like a sixth of the way into the second book and just got pulled in 8 different directions. I think it was the holiday season at work. And that is always a bad time for me to be doing any attempts at reading.
I totally understand. I have to make time to read nowadays.
And I really should.
Now, again, we have Game of Thrones, which is a huge cast of characters and, of course, houses. What house is your favorite?
Favorite house? Hold on, I am blanking on the name of that. I just need to take a look here. There we go. All right. Yeah, my favorite house up until pretty recently was Tyrell. But that's not so much of a thing anymore. Oopsie doodles. Oh, I'm blowing the whole thing up.
Yeah, I think I was doing my my Game of Thrones review, and we were going through the houses, and we're like, yeah, there's not really many houses left. Like, of the great houses, there's not many still around at this point.
All right. I mean, I guess you can break the wheel by breaking the spokes or just removing them wholesale.
Oh, absolutely. Like, you don't have you don't have the Tyrells, you don't have the Martells.
Fraser about out.
Fraser gone. Aaron's gone. Well,
I mean, Aaron still has. You technically still have John Aaron. We don't exactly know what's going on with him right now because his. The steward of that house is dead in the Stark courtroom. Hell yes, best scene of the show. Oh, it was so good. It was so good. My wife and I were standing up screaming at the TV in that scene.
Yeah, that scene was awesome. And it's like they had built it up to be like, okay, what's going to happen? Are the sisters going to go at each other, or are they going to come together? Is it a long con? What is happening? And then just to get that was incredible.
Right. Now, I have I read somewhere online that they actually did film a scene where Sansa goes to Bran and is like, look, I need your help. And then the scene cuts there. So I think through the power of editing, they went back in time and realized, no, the girls doing a long con is the better story here. And I'm glad they went that way because I agree that is a much more powerful story. It isn't, it doesn't have that kind of, it would feel cliche otherwise just because they did have that long-standing rivalry before they went their separate ways.
Now, how did you get into Game of Thrones? Was it right when it started premiering on HBO, or was it after like that first season and people are like, oh my gosh, you got to watch it?
No, I think I came on either in the middle of the second or third season. I forget which. And I was in the middle of a show. We were doing Murder at the Cathedral with a local theater company that I now do some work for. And I was going to rehearsal pretty much every day. And every joke that the director and some of like the principal cast members would make were Game of Thrones references. Like, all right, I gotta bite the bullet on this dang old thing. So I went home and I binged probably like 15 hours of it over the course of 3 or 4 days. And got myself as caught up as I possibly could. And by the time we had our next rehearsal, it's like, okay, I'm here and I know everything and I have opinions. But it has become one of my favorite shows, and it is one of the few things that I have recommended to my wife that she has gone all in on with me. Normally it's the other way around, but she, after the initial weirdness, because you do have to get over that hurdle of just very blatant sex and violence, even in that first episode, it's just all out there. But once you get past that, and kind of get that little bit of desensitization going, it's really, it's so good.
It is. My wife, I've tried to get my wife into it a few times, and her problem is that after she's come home and, you know, she's worked all day, she doesn't want to sit and focus and try to understand like the 20 different characters that you're seeing and understanding like all the different little plots that are going on. She's more of a, give me like 20 minutes mindless entertainment where I don't have to pay attention. And I really want her to get into the show, but man, I totally understand.
Yep. And that is, and I understand that, which is why my wife and I typically watch it, at least when the shows are coming out. They'll come out Sunday nights, but Sunday also happens to be my D&D night. So we will save it for Monday morning before, usually she doesn't go into work until like noon 30, 1 o'clock. So we can get an episode in and, you know, do our shopping and talk about what the hell we just saw.
Now, who's your favorite character in the show?
Sir Davos. There aren't that many characters that are just good. And he's just good. Like, he just wants the best for everybody. And in a world that is so grimdark, it is nice to see that shining bit of light. Sam Tarly comes up as my number 2. And he was my number 1 for a very short period of time when he stole the family sword. That was, I'm all about that, and I'm really looking forward to next year when we get to have, you know, a room with all of my favorite characters in it all at the same time.
Yes, that will be so wonderful. I love Sam. Like, I love, and I know you had said it in your email that you sent over to me that you love like the second fiddles.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way. Like, I love Neville, I love Sam, I love Davos. And I really like them because, like you said, out of the entire like world of, you know, these people are all being disgusting towards each other, and they're not looking out for who they're like actually, you know, the people who are actually doing the fighting and all the, like, the citizens and everything. Like, Davos is like, you know, can't we just get along kind of thing? Like, I've been here. I worked under Stannis. Like, I was being honorable with Stannis, and now I'm with you. And I love how Davos has come across from the books to what's in the show, and how he has really grown. Like, he's one of those characters where I'm like, man, he doesn't have a lot of room to grow, but I've loved seeing his growth from being like illiterate to he can read, and he's like an advisor, and, you know, going from where he was. Yeah,
he is definitely, like, out of all of the characters, I think, in that show, he has had the most interesting journey.
Oh yeah. And of course with Sam, I love how, you know, he starts off with saying that he wants to be a wizard, and now he was training to be a maester, which is as close to wizardry as you're going to get. And I'm really interested to see what they do with him coming out of you know, the Citadel and going and leaving that behind.
Sounds like he's heading back up north to Winterfell, and I'm really looking forward to see how that goes. Because that is, you know, he did defy the Lord Commander's orders, but the Lord Commander was dead for about 20 minutes, half hour. So, you know, maybe that's okay.
Yep, there you go. Like, the orders don't matter now.
Look, I mean, everybody's breaking out left and right. I mean, you know, we're just going to kind of make do with what we can.
Do you think they're going to be able to cover everything that we want to see in the 6 episodes that they're talking about?
If they make them all like an hour and a half, 2 hours long, give me 6 feature-length films. Yeah, we'll see what we need to see. Now, I'm very curious at how these episodes are going to be meted out, because we've just got, I mean, the nice thing about them blowing up entire great houses is that the number of subplots that we started off with dwindles every season. Especially with Lord Baelish that takes off quite a few as well. That gets rid of the spider. Or rather than get rid of the spider, but that pretty much puts Lord Varys as the kind of reigning spy master for the Seven Kingdoms. And then you've got, I mean, we talked about Jon Arryn as well. It's like, that is probably going to be put into more capable hands with Peter Baelish out of the picture. So now, all eyes are going to be turning north, except for Cersei's, who's going to be collecting power. And those are going to be that three-way war is going to be the power struggle that we see over the next season. And I think 6 episodes might be enough to cover that.
I am hopeful. I had actually predicted before the season ended last season that we would resolve the entire Cersei Daenerys storyline by the end. And I was like, oh, okay, this is where they're going with it. And I was like, all right, I'll enjoy seeing that as long as it doesn't take up, 6 episodes, even if they do, hopefully, 2 hours each. Hopefully something gets resolved. So it's like, okay, what's going to happen at the end?
Mm-hmm. Now, do you do much lore diving into Game of Thrones?
Very, very little. I mean, I've read all the books.
Sure.
And I've gone to some of the websites that talk, different different possible outcomes and storylines, but nothing like too deep.
Sure. One of my favorite YouTube channels over the past couple of years is one called Alt Shift X, which is a predominantly TV lore YouTube channel, and this guy has tons and tons of videos on, hey, where are all of the Valyrian steel swords? Do we know? Because those are kind of important. What's going on with those? And the different prophecies that are in the books, and kind of diving into different ways that those could be interpreted. And even, going so far as to say, it's like, well, I mean, the, the prophecy of Azor Ahai, that's pretty vague. Do you know who that can also apply to? Sir Pounce, the cat, Comet's cat. And he makes it, I mean, look, it's a C plus out of a theory, but it checks out. So if you are like me and absolutely starved for some Game of Thrones content, as we do come up on the year since the last season was, well, now we got about 6 months until we hit the year mark of the last season being released. But if when that hunger strikes, that is a great way to slake that for a little while.
Well, I'll have to check those out, because I do enjoy stuff where I can just listen to, or even, casually watch something while I work and get to, just dive into some of the good stuff. And I know one of the things I had pulled up was, and it might have been tying it to the books, was, okay, where's all the, as you said, all the Valyrian steel swords, where are they? And let's find them. And
right.
That was an interesting, dive into it.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you want at the end, if there is a technical winner, or whoever sits on the Iron Throne, if it still exists, who would you like to see in power at the end of the show?
I feel like Jon Snow is the most stable bet. I would not be sad to see either Daenerys or Sansa on there as well. Going for oddball ones, I suppose. I don't know. Brienne of Tarth's pretty cool. I bet she'd be all right at that. But I mean, that is going way, way afield of anything that could possibly happen. I mean, pretty much anybody but Cersei at this point, because at some point, anybody but her is better.
It's pretty much a anybody but Cersei type of moment sometimes. It's like, dang,
yeah.
She just needs to. She'll eventually get what's coming to her. I just wonder who it's going to be that gets her.
I mean, there's the whole thing with the Valanquir, and there's, you've got a 50-50 shot. Either is as likely as the other one. One of them is much more satisfying, but we will see when that comes. And I don't think that plot line, I don't think that part of the prophecy is in, was that in the show? Was that in that scene in the witch's hut?
I'm not sure if it was, but I think it's been brought up before, because that's why she's always gunned for Tyrion.
Right. Yes, and for those of you who haven't read the books or don't know about this prophecy, there is in the books when Cersei as a child goes to visit this witch, the witch tells her, "Hey, just so you know, you will be killed by the Valkyr," which is a word for younger brother, which she has always thought to mean Tyrion, but technically Jaime is like a minute or two younger than her, so that's anybody's ball game.
So switching now from lighthearted fantasy warfare to, or from heavy fantasy warfare to lighthearted and funny sometimes fantasy warfare, is the dual combination of what I like to call the Avatar verse, and we're not talking about the blue aliens.
God, no.
But Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, which is the follow-up. Again, how'd you get into the series? Because I know for me, I caught it as it was coming out, and then like because we were moving so much, I lost track of it, and then I'd be like, "Oh, I'll catch an episode or two here or there," and be like, "I have no idea what's going on."
Right,
but so good.
Yeah, no, I missed that as it was coming out actually, and I was because I think probably between like 15 and 17 when those episodes, it started coming out on Nick. And that was just on the edge of like, I am too cool for Nickelodeon anymore. I can't watch this, even though it looks super cool. But I ended up catching it after I went off to school. I went to school for digital art. So one of that was a pretty big animation component. And a lot of my friends at the time were, really into it. It's like, no, this is good. Like, the animation is pretty good and it's fun to watch and it's funny. It's like, all right, after like 2 years of badgering, I finally caved in and started watching it. And I was immediately hook, line, and sinker drawn all the way in. And then, so I watched it all the way through, and then I went and saw the movie, and oh God, why did I do that? That is just the only thing that movie is good for is showing people how bad it can get. And then I did a whole rewatch when I got my wife into it, and then they announced Korra. And while I feel like that was mishandled by the network, I thought the show, with the exception of season 2, which is a little rough, is very, very good.
That's an interesting take on Korra, especially because I know that I had the struggle of getting through season 1 of Korra, and then season 2, probably about halfway into season 2 was when I was like, okay, I'm digging the show now.
Gotcha. Yeah, I really liked how lighthearted season 1 was. Season 2 got a little bit more into like the weird romantic drama that is not typically what I go to that show for. And it also went into the worst supernatural entity ever, Rava, who is awful and useless. I do not like that weird spirit tadpole because she does very little, and the one moment, or it, I suppose, I don't know, they didn't really gender it, but as soon as it comes into play, at least in, the modern setting that the show takes place in, it's immediately killed, and that's the end of it, and we don't know, like, does that power ever get restored? Because for those of you who haven't watched this show, one of the things about the Avatars constantly reborn, but they have the ability to meditate and speak with their past lives, which was something that was pretty heavily utilized in both the first series and the first season, or rather, it was being more utilized at the very end of the first season of the second run of the show. It's a little confusing to explain, but that is something that is just taken away wholesale, which was, I can understand why they would want to do that narratively, but, or rather, as they're writing that story, you don't want to have somebody who can just access all the answers that they need at any given moment. But what that meant was that this, very powerful, kind of judgy supernatural being just had to get spanked, pretty ruthlessly, and it was not super satisfying to see. Now, that being said, seasons 3 and 4 are absolutely perfect. It deals with some really intense emotional baggage by the end of it, and it is wonderful to see these characters, like all of these characters, kind of come to a really satisfying conclusion, including a lesbian relationship on Nickelodeon, which that hasn't happened before. And that's really neat that they did that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things with Korra where like I had not watched Korra at the time and it was ending, and all the news stories were coming out about how the network had pulled it from like actually being on Nickelodeon and you had to watch like the last few episodes online.
Yep.
And it came out like how it ended. I was like, oh, I need to watch like this entire series now. And I know a few friends of mine were like, yeah, it's really good. You've been missing out. And I, that first season was the season where it's like, you're coming from the world of the Avatar: The Last Airbender, where they're traveling on horse or by lizard creature, or, Appa. And now you're in this like steampunky kind of like world. And it's like, okay, you got like the whatever 50, 60, 70 years of time in between. I can see it to some extent. Sometimes I'm like, maybe it's pushing it a little bit, but you have a world of bending. So I think it just took me some time to get used to, but I loved how it concluded, and I really am glad that they stuck with what they had wanted to do, rather than, I don't know if there's any pressure of like, oh no, don't do that, we don't want that, versus like what they actually did.
I feel like there was a little bit of push there. I mean, there must have been pushback from the network, because I remember reading as it was coming out, the last season does have something that none of the other seasons of Avatar have, and it's a clip show. It's because they were, ordered to, like, they were commissioned, or however you want to put it, to make a certain number of episodes for the show, but they also had their budget cut at the same time, potentially because that was coming. And now the first run of the show did have the Ember Island Players, which is the best clip show ever of all time. I love it so much. But they had to kind of retrofit stuff to make it an actual clip, like a normal clip show, work for the end of the final season.
Yeah, it's definitely something where I'm glad that I got to watch it. And now, like, again, I watched all of Avatar and all of Korra with my kids, and they loved it. My wife loved it. My wife didn't like Korra at all. She's like, I hate Korra. Like, she doesn't connect with Korra. She thinks that Korra is just not a good character for her that she enjoys. Okay. The only time that she enjoyed Korra was when Toph showed up.
Yeah, Toph was pretty great in Korra. Pretty great. I was a little sad we didn't get Sokka, but I mean, we got him a little bit, but in that one flashback episode, but can't have everything.
Yeah, that was the one thing where I was like, man, where's Sokka? Like, what happened with Sokka? Does Sokka not have kids? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, come on. Let's see something. Now, full disclosure, I have not read the comics because I know that they do have both shows. Actually, have a very robust series of comics that came out after the fact. I own one of them. I just haven't gotten around to reading it because it does, when you buy them now, it comes in really thick hardback volumes. So I need to go back and read those. And I know the Korra comics that are coming out now are diving a little bit more into her relationship with Asami, which is neat too.
Yeah, I've got the first one of the Korra comic. I haven't read it though. And then the second volume just came out, I think Wednesday of last week. So it's not too far in, but again, haven't read them, so I don't know much about what's going on.
Sure.
I know one of the Avatar series comics dealt with Zuko's mother and finding her and what happened.
I think it's called The Promise. I think that might be one of the ones that I have.
Yeah, I think that might be. So that one, I've read the synopsis on the internet because I needed to know like what actually happened, and it's very like all. It's a lot of like mind work to like understand like, okay, this happened, and then you get to what it actually like occurred. I'm like, okay, that's a lot. I'm glad they didn't do that in the series. Like comics work for that. Now, who's your favorite characters in either show? Do you got one?
Well, in Airbender, it would be Sokka. Again, with the second fiddles, and I definitely identify with the guy who tries to be the lighthearted one in the group, even when things are, this is not the time for jokes. And Pabu. I love Babu. Little fire fairy, he's so cool. But Bolin again, like going with the second fiddles, and he tries so hard, and is incredibly competent when he gets his feet under him. But it does take a while for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely when they started Korra. It's definitely like, okay, who is the Aang of the group? Who's the Sokka of the group? Who's the Katara of the group? And I think it took a while for them to figure out, like, okay, we're not going to have to go by those roles. They can be their own. And I think Bolin is one of the ones that suffered a lot. Like, it felt like they didn't know what to do with him at times.
Right. They knew he was. They knew his brother was a foil for him, but not much else.
Mm-hmm. If you had bender powers, which bending would you like?
That's it. Firebending. I hate being cold. I hate being cold so much. I would flagrantly abuse firebending on a pretty regular basis if I had the ability to do that.
That's cool. I always wondered myself, like, okay, what would I like to have? And like, I'm totally not a water person, and I my personal sign is like a fire sign, but again, I don't want that. Fire is so dangerous, like,
right.
And you see it with how Aang like learns fire and he like burns things down.
Yeah.
No thanks. So I totally feel like I'd be Earth. As far as, I just want to move stuff. I'd love to fly, but
right.
That's not going to happen either. I'm scared of heights. So I'll stick to the ground.
Yeah, that's absolutely... Yeah, but that's a good way to go about thinking about it. Yeah.
Who was the better avatar before we wrap this up? Who do you like better as the avatar, Aang or Korra?
And that's another rough one because you don't get to see, like, and again, I haven't read all the way through the comics, but you really don't get to see either of them doing a whole lot of like capital A avatar stuff. I do, from what we saw, I definitely really do like the person that Aang ended up being. I think he ended up really going a long way to collecting himself and becoming a force unto his own. And that was definitely very neat to see, especially with, taking a look at his progeny. Like, man, Tenzin's real cool. And not just because J.K. Simmons voices him, but it does help. But the other two kids are also very, very neat. And I like the route that Korra was going. But I would really want to see, and maybe with the comics, maybe we'll get this opportunity, but I would love to see who she becomes, 10, 15, 20 years after the events of the fourth season.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we'll ever get another Avatar show?
I think it would be absolutely foolish for Nickelodeon to hold on to those rights if they're not going to do anything with them. I think they could make a lot of people happy and themselves a lot of money if they sold them off to one of the major streaming platforms, and maybe we can get something going there. I'm sure Netflix would do something phenomenal with them, or Hulu, or hell, give them to Crunchyroll. I don't care. I'll get a Crunchyroll subscription if I get to watch more of the show, especially if it ends up being good.
Absolutely. I know if they moved it to Netflix, I would love it because I love what Netflix has done with the Voltron series.
Oh, I've heard that's really good.
Oh, it's so good. But again, I grew up watching the original Voltron, so I was already like, oh yes, Voltron, I love it. And then when they came out with it, it was like, oh, this is like 100 times better than what I watched.
Yeah, I am only a little bit leery because I also saw what they did with Magic School Bus, and while I am sure the show itself is fine, the animation gives me the heebie-jeebies.
I don't think I've seen that one. I'll have to check and see what's up with the animation.
I haven't watched the actual show, but I saw the trailer that they put out must have been 6 months ago. And it won a lot of points with me at first because Lin-Manuel Miranda was the one who re-recorded the theme song. And okay. I'm a big Hamilton guy, so that was really neat to see or hear. But the animation is very it's very blocky and very stiff. And, you know, I went to school for that. And it's like, oh, this looks like a Flash animation from the, you know, early 2000s. This is not making me super comfortable with the direction it's going. But, I was a huge fan of the original show, and I am glad that it is going to be, you know, living on, and, you know, some people will go and find it and find the original, you know, after the fact.
Absolutely. And it's good that, you know, people there, it's still out there for kids too, and
Yeah.
hopefully people do watch it and are like, oh, new Magic School Bus.
Yep.
Interesting. Now, getting to the last thing that we'll talk about, and that is your podcast, which is called Another Path.
Yes.
And for those who haven't watched, or not watched it, for those who haven't listened to it, what is Another Path?
Another Path is an actual play D&D podcast using 5th edition, where myself as the DM, I take my 3 friends, Griffin, Ryan, and Zach, through the Kindle Lands, which is a homebrew world that I have made up. It is kind of a post flora world where about a couple hundred years ago, one day the plants of this peninsula just woke up and started to attack everything, and a war was waged, and now plants are incredibly scarce where they live. So it is, you know, essentially a desert continent that they are living on, and they are going through, trying to figure out how much plot to reveal here. But they are, and magic is deeply distrusted. Nobody knows why the plants woke up. So magic, by and large, is heavily regulated by the government. And now there is a magical crisis going on, and these 3 kind of walked ass backwards into the situation, and now they are key figures in trying to protect an entire branch of magic for these people. So we've been going since about May of last year. Yeah, May of 2017 is when we started. We are, as of recording now in early February, we are 20 proper episodes in. They typically run from 45 minutes to an hour long. We have like 2 episodes that run an hour and a half just because we had so much content to get through. But we try to keep things relatively bite-sized. And we've got a couple of, if you're not sure how you're feeling about it, if you can actually, we've started doing checkmark episodes, or checkpoint episodes, where you can kind of come in as things are happening, get caught up really quick, and then dive right in with what's going on right then and there. And if you want to dive on back, that is absolutely, you know, to get the full experience of the story, that is an option too.
How did you decide to run an actual play podcast? Like, what was the motivation for that?
Sure. Well, it started out, the gaming group that I have been in here in Ohio has been going, like, at least there have been similar groups of people, the same people, people cycle in and out, and like I don't think any of the original people are a part of this group anymore. But people have been coming together for years and years and years and years and years, like longer than I've been a part of it, and that goes back to 2010. So we've been, gaming together for a long time, and I moved away for a little while, and when I came back, only a handful of people had really gotten into any podcasts at all, but all of us that did were all in on the Adventure Zone. And one day after playing, we just kind of looked at each other. I was like, we can do this. We can, all of us know how to run. We can all tell stories. We're all theater people, which is, I think, kind of one of our better things that we've got going for us, is that we absolutely do have an air of character building and character growth. And, we write with I write with the theatrics in mind. So going forward with that was definitely a big thing. So with that kind of collective mindset, we sat down and we did the dangle thing.
And as far as the players go, how did they settle on their characters? Because I know some people, they just are like, okay, I'm going to play the fighter, I'll play the rogue, I'll play the wizard.
Sure.
Like, was that the way that your players set it up, or were they like, well, let me just be wild and pick something different?
Yeah, I just told them to kind of have at it, and this is the second time that I have run in this world. I actually did run a group through 2 campaigns in this kind of collective setting here. About this time last year, I think we were starting to wrap up on that, and as we so I had all of my old, my world documents. So I just sent that out to them. I did a couple of minor edits with things that I have thought of and things that happened in the previous setting. And I told them, hey, just talk with me about what kind of characters you want to do, and we'll make it happen. So we've got Zach is playing Zephyr Johnson, the Dragonborn Warlock. We've got my friend Ryan, who plays Jackson Silver. He is a fighter. And we've got my friend Griffin, who is playing Mordecai, a multi-classed barbarian druid, but he is also playing as one of the unearthed arcana races, a shifter, which is really neat, which I'm sure you know because you are currently running an Eberron campaign.
Yep.
Or yeah, that is an Eberron race, isn't it?
That is an original Eberron race. Yes,
excellent.
Sir.
All right, I thought so. Eberron was the first long form campaign that I really have like solid memories of doing. So I have a lot of like I'm going to be hopping onto your actual play podcast here pretty soon to listen, because that is I just cannot wait for them to put out Eberron stuff officially for 5th edition, because that hits me where I live.
Let it be soon.
I hope so. But yeah, one of the things that we realized, because in the world that I have set up, druid magic is straight up taboo. You have to have government supervision in order to use druid magic, because hell, druids might have been the reasons that the plants got up and started wrecking shop. So we had to, I sat down with Griffin. It's like, okay, we can absolutely do this multi-classing thing, but we've got to work out, how that is going to work. So he started out as a barbarian, which meant that entire party started off with no healing capacity. Which is, just means that every time you go to town, it is a potion bonanza. And those things are not cheap at low levels. So, but that has, watching how the characters have learned to work with each other is a really interesting aspect of it, because, you've got the fighter who is a dyed in the blood military man, and he was trying to get back out, but they're pulling him back in for one last job. And you've got the warlock who was conscripted into the military. He didn't want to do that. It's just kind of something he was forced into doing at a pretty, unfortunately young age. And then you've got the shifter, who was born into a military family and just kind of accepted it as a part of his life. So you've got a lot of dynamics of the characters, working within the power structure of this world kind of coming together. And I know I'm talking a lot of serious grimdark stuff. It's a pretty lighthearted show. We tend to keep things pretty breezy where we can. We actually recently wrapped up a couple of episodes where in the early part of the game, they found, I have a table of random items they can find. They found a bunch of hallucinogenic bugs, and they're like, hey, we want to see what you do with this. It's like, okay, it's going to get weird. And I sent them to kind of a Neo, Blade Runner future of this world for an episode, or for about an entire episode. It's like, okay, let's see what happens with this. And it goes off the rails pretty quickly, and it's pretty funny, if I could say so myself.
That's awesome. Hallucinogenic bugs. Must remember that one.
Yes. It is a fun device if you wanna go down some strange roads. It's a really great way to go.
That's awesome. Now, as far as for people that are going to listen, what would you equate it to? Is there something that you'd be like, if you liked this, you would like listening to another path?
That's a tough one. It is. If you like the dark sun setting, but you wish it was a little less grim, this is a pretty good place to be.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought of first when you were talking desert. I was like, oh, dark sun.
Yep. No. Dark Sun is the setting I wish I had more like any experience with personally, but the group that I run in with up here, we do entirely homebrew settings 9 times out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
So it was every so often we will pull inspiration from things, but everything is homebrew, homemade. Cook it up and serve it to your friends.
Not everybody needs halflings that are cannibals.
Exactly.
Yes, definitely. Now, for people who have been listening and they want to find you or find the podcast or find you on the social media sites, what are some of the best places to do so?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter at TQLoudly. You can find Another Path on Twitter at AnotherPathPod, on Facebook at facebook.com/AnotherPathPodcast, at our website, AnotherPathPodcast.com. You can also find me at my other podcast. We really didn't get into this one that much because I believe I found you through the My Brother and Me podcast group. Is that right?
I think maybe a tabletop RPG podcast.
That's the one. Possibly. So yeah, that's definitely why this one didn't come up. But I also am the producer on another show called Shakespeare through the theater company that I mentioned at the very beginning of the show. Where my friends, my wife and I all sit down around a table and we talk and sometimes argue very loudly about Shakespeare and different shows and how they react or how they relate to modern settings, adaptations, and all that fun stuff. And you can find that show at Shakespeare, along with Another Path, actually, on any of the fine podcatchers you may use. And Shakespeare specifically can be found at our website, lionfaceproductions.com.
Awesome. And I'll have all the links to those in our show notes, as well as the website and Facebook page and wherever you find this podcast. So that way you can easily click on it and go check everything out. And Chase, I just want to say thank you for joining me on this podcast to talk about everything that you love and Another Path.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/talesfromthefandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.